Okay, well, we'll move swiftly on to Elaine. Many of the viewers will know Elaine because she's presented at a couple of our festivals in the past, actually, about postnatal depression. She's a writer, an inspirational speaker, and I would say she is an inspirational speaker too. And she has talked about postnatal depression, bereavement, and overcoming challenges. So she's very skilled on that. She's also been taking part in TV and radio programs, and she's a very lively tweeter. And she has also been recovering from long COVID, and she's been sharing her experiences on Twitter, which has been very, I'm sure, very useful to people who didn't know very much about it. So without further ado, Elaine, the screen is now yours, and welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for picking up on my story as I was going along. Thank you, Claire, as well, for all that information. And I know you saw me nodding away there because there was so much that I agreed with, I've experienced. And yes, thank you for that. And I'm sure I'll be following up on those links as well. As Susan said, normally, yes, I'm a professional speaker, and pre-COVID, I certainly would describe myself as being very confident, efficient, organised, and a very busy person. I had lots of speaking engagement booked, and actually I was reflecting literally this time last year, I had been invited to be a keynote speaker over in Qatar for a major Middle Eastern conference on mental health, and I confidently did that. I'm also PA to my fiance, Mike, who's an executive coach. And also, in addition to that, I do an online bookkeeping job. And just to fill in the other gaps, I work part-time at our local convenience store, and I'm now shift manager 3 times a week. So that was me pre-COVID, here, there and everywhere. Then lockdown started. Of course, overnight, all of my speaking engagements vanished. Mike's work also went. And yet, wow, at the store, we were so busy. This was in the days of no pasta, no toilet rolls, and the local corner shop really became into its own. So we were, the company looked for friends and family to work in the shop as well. So Mike joined me, and both of us, for most of March and April, we were both behind the till and keeping the local village going, really. 20th of April dawned, and both of us began with symptoms of COVID. From being so busy and everything seemed to be going all right, being proud that we were contributing as key workers, that was it. We then, both of us, succumbed to a horrendous cough, the fever, aches, pains, earache, headache, exhausted, and almost like an octopus on roller skates. The symptoms seemed to come and go and change so much. Breathing was a challenge, and that's when I started to tweet, and literally I just do a very short film just to say to people, look, this is a real illness, please be careful out there. We were at the point that even literally going to the bathroom was too much effort. After about 2 weeks, Mike was admitted to hospital because he'd developed a secondary infection whereby he couldn't literally walk. He'd got an inner ear infection. And the night that the ambulance men came and took him away was one of the lowest points of my life, because at that point you were hearing of the stories of people going into hospital and never coming out. And I remember the paramedics looking at me and commenting on how poorly I looked, and it looked like I should be going. But as Claire said, not everybody was going. Thankfully, 3 days later, he returned. And then it became the summer and autumn of the dressing gown. And that's okay. We literally seemed to manage from then support from the GP. Our family was great. We had our neighbour Steph, who delightfully left us gorgeous cakes on the doorstep for us, and other family and friends offered support, and of course each other. We were very much looking forward to getting married in September. Yet the days of illness became weeks, and the weeks became months. We had to make the heartbreaking decision to postpone our wedding, which was planned for the 26th of September, because neither of us were well enough to do the planning, let alone enjoy it. And like the rest of the country, the world, holidays were cancelled and all the celebrations in life. And of course, work ceased. The impact, as we realised that we were amongst the people then described as having long COVID, I agree with Claire very much. They are unique. And for me, I would say my mind, my body and my spirit have been impacted. My mind, since my postnatal period where I did ultimately develop purple psychosis, my mental health has been great, absolutely. And even when I lost my partner coming up for 10 years ago now, that period of grief, even then my mental health was still okay. Yet during long COVID, I've become overwhelmed with just everyday tasks. The anxiety I've witnessed is something that I've never experienced before. My confidence has been completely sapped. When I think of, say this time last year in front of 800 people, now I'm back to just 1 or 2 people. I can find it to be quite a challenge. I just really want to stay under the duvet. And yes, and again, as Claire mentioned, the sleep issues, my sleep has been diabolical. My body, everything just seems to be an effort. I just have still the lack of energy, and my usual zest for life just seems really to evaporated. And even now, I think you can hear as I'm speaking, I do still get quite breathless. Yesterday, day before, I literally walked about 7 minutes it is to the post office, and I had to stop on the way back because I was still having to gasp for breath. And my spirit, I feel partially I've lost myself again. I think as well there's an element of guilt there, that you see the heartbreaking headlines, the figures now over 60,000 people who are no longer here. And you feel that sense of guilt that you should be grateful because you still are. There's that sense of shame that you feel people will be thinking, oh, for goodness sake, by now she should be better. Get over it. Boris was back, out of intensive care within weeks, back running the country, all of these things. And I think the underlying thing that I still feel is a real sense of apathy. And I'm not usually the sort of person who thinks, can't be bothered. And yet so often at the moment, I feel like that. My blogging stopped because can't be bothered. But ultimately, I know one of the key messages I've always shared over the years as I've spoken and in my writing, I always have stressed the importance you have to look after yourself first so that you can look after other people. And this is one of the first things I've actually done about this, other than my little clips that I had put out, because I feel just maybe, yes, there is improvement. And as time goes on, I will write about it more, and I want to speak about it. So where am I now? Well, about 3-4 weeks ago, I did start back at the shop on a phased return. Officially, I'm not classed anymore as being ill. I have no sick note, and yet I'm not fully recovered. So this is why I would be prepared to speak more about this and to look into ways that you can make it easier for people, because financially I had to make an effort and start back at the shop. So what's helped me though? Because I am definitely improving. I was lucky enough to win a competition run by Cheshire Life magazine, which I think the strap line was, what have you done to improve your health and well-being during lockdown? And my reply was, I've worn my dressing gown and not been out. And I won a full makeover. I got a very nice photo shoot and a beautiful new coat, which I still haven't been able to wear. It's in the cupboard with the red shoes. And but the best part of it was a nutrition and movement program called My Time for Change. And I literally had daily support through nutrition and a very short exercise clip. And it's been incredible. I've lost a dress size. Mike has gone down about 2 suit sizes, and that wasn't the aim. What has happened though was the fact I wanted to be educated to how could we fuel our bodies? How could we heal it? And even though I've finished officially that program, we're still using it. And it's a great day when I hear Mike say, oh, I've missed a salad the last few days. So that has been a great change, and I would recommend that. I'm aware that sleep is a vulnerable point for me, and I know that becoming so ill postnatally, one of the key things then was the fact that it was sleep deprivation. So I've been very aware of what can I do in this situation. And I have a very good friend who is a hypnotherapist, and he very kindly has sent me one of his programs, and I think I'm month 2 into that. And again, it's improving. I do recommend a phased return to work. I'm not ready for the responsibility yet. I do find that the brain fog that Claire mentioned, yeah, I mean, I put some washing on the other day and then realised why was the kitchen warm, and I realised I'd put this on to dry, not to wash. I went and bought some wool the other day, and I was waving my phone over the ball of wool on the counter thinking, why isn't my contactless working? And I realised that no, a ball of wool doesn't do that. You have to move the phone over to the machine. They're just bizarre is the right word. They just really are dozy things. I think it's great as well to make space for fun and silliness. We'd planned our wedding the second time for the 14th of November, all going well, 2 weeks before we got the second lockdown. And again, we had to cancel or postpone our wedding. So we marked the 14th of November by having a barbecue in our courtyard at night when it was cold, playing loud music that we'd actually identified for the wedding, had quite a bit to drink, and yeah, had a fantastic night. We really did. And we decided to make a different memory out of, instead of sitting there thinking, oh, this would have been happening. We had a fabulous night. So I'm all for fun and silliness. I think there's a great comfort knowing that you're not alone. And that was why I shared my story of perinatal mental health, because I know through the many people telling me that hearing my story has helped them. And I sincerely hope by sharing this, it's helping somebody. And the other thing I've begun to do, my best friend Sue reminded me, Elaine, pick up your knitting needles again. You enjoy knitting. Yeah, for many months again, can't be bothered. And that little encouragement by Sue led to me now a new little business. I'm now creating and have been selling Barbie clothes online. And I find that by sitting knitting while I am watching Tipping Point or whatever else, at least I feel I'm being productive. So part of the older me is emerging of always wanting to be busy and always being constructive with things. And it's also, I know it's a form of mindfulness, because while I'm thinking knit one, purl one, cast on three, etc., my brain has just for a moment stopped with all these thoughts about what could be, should be, why cut on, all of that stuff. It just can stop. So the future, we know this will pass, and that we can hopefully in the new year begin to start making proper plans again and meeting people properly. I look forward to being back on real platforms again. And Mike and I have even discussed as a married couple, hopefully, that we would love to do joint presentations. It would be wonderful to wear nice clothes again, starting with my wedding dress. Everything is crossed for the 30th of January. Please, third time round, let's be lucky. So my final tips for everybody, and I'm aware this was for you as midwives and student midwives, but I hope, I was asked to share my story and as a generic example of what can happen. I think for all of us, we need to be patient, we need to be kind, we need to be understanding and have a non-judgmental approach. And that applies to ourselves, first and foremost, and to others. If you need support, ask for it and be gracious for it. If someone does kindly offer to make you a spaghetti bolognese, does it really matter if it's not whole wheat pasta? No, enjoy it and be grateful. And if you see someone or are aware of someone struggling with long COVID, ask them, what do they need? What would they find helpful? And it might just be a very basic thing. Just ask. And finally, the way that I'm getting through is a bit like they say people running a marathon. You don't need to run 26 miles. You do it a mile at a time and break it down one step in front of the other. So at the moment, I encourage us all to focus on now, when the future is still a little bit unknown, and respond to the mood and the moment. And I sincerely hope I won't be having another barbecue on the 30th of January. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Elaine. And I think your points about being patient, kindness and judgmental, especially for self, I think in the context of long COVID appears to be a big thing, because I think, and Claire raised about, and it has remembrances of when people used to start talking about ME as being yuppie flu, with a sort of almost it wasn't real, it wasn't important. And one of the biggest things was finding for people who have it is acknowledging that it is real and they need support and care. And I think this has come over very, very strongly from both of your presentations. So thank you very, very much for sharing that. I think it makes me feel very humble to think what you've both been through, and you're coming out and being so positive and very inspirational, the pair of you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Almost like two twins here.
And you know what? We didn't. I keep looking at Elaine and think, oh my God, her features are like mine, her hair's all. But we didn't plan that we were going to say those things. We actually didn't know what each other was going to say, did we? About those?
No. And, well, now we have a little time for questions. So thank you, everybody, for watching and sending questions. We've had lots and lots of lovely comments to both Claire and Elaine saying how much they've found it very useful and enjoyable. And we have a question from Christine. Hi, Christine. And I'm looking over here because I have two screens. And one screen comes the questions. And it says, Christine says, is long COVID clearly diagnosed, or can it be confused with any other illness? Which I think Claire alluded to. I don't know if you'd like to take that, Claire.
I don't think it is one clear thing. I think the best that we can say is it describes how long something has lasted, for the reasons that I think it's a very complex illness. It's an infection of the blood vessels, so it goes wherever the blood goes. So, and then some people with good immune systems will fight it off very easily. Others, like there's quite a lot of people with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, we have coexistent, exaggerated immune reactions. It's just so individual. But I think what's going to happen is that not one thing predominates. Some people will have ongoing virus, others will not. Others will have inflammatory conditions that are triggered and then settle. I just think it's a whole mixture. So no, I don't think we can say it is a thing. And I think there is that is confusing about how it's reported. But I do think our doctors need to catch up with things a bit in the country and sort of, yeah.
I suppose there's been such a focus on the kind of acute COVID without understanding fully the other kind of iterations of it. No, that's grand. Thank you. And we have a question from Celine, who says, you say that long COVID can be considered one day as part of chronic disease?
No, what I meant was that Trisha Greenhalgh had written about it in terms of timescale, and I think that's a perfectly accurate way of doing it. And people are arguing over what it's called. In the literal sense, it is chronic, i.e., it's been long term. I don't think we know enough yet. It's only been around a year or so as to whether it will be. Whether things will last. I think in some people it triggers things that are autoimmune. Whether these will settle or not, we don't know. Whether people will become undiabetic, I don't know.
No, that's grand.
Hopefully for most people it will have a conclusion.
Okay, thank you for that. Now we have Edith K. Hi, Edith, says, is in terms of the risk of I think postnatal depression, should we as midwives routinely giving advice specifically on this in relation to COVID, i.e. prior discharges and during home visits? I'm assuming that, Edith, you're talking about long COVID being a risk. I'm not quite sure on the question, actually, having started that question. That sounds a little bit confusing, I think, in terms of postnatal depression. Because I think you'd have views on postnatal depression, wouldn't you, Elaine? Perhaps you'd like to.
I was going to say, I think any situation in life where you have potentially two very vulnerable areas, I would suggest that any pregnant lady or newly delivered baby mother who either herself has had COVID or long COVID, or has a close supporter, her partner, her parent, for example, with long COVID, that they should be almost put on a watch and wakeful watching, or be aware of the fact that that could impact even more. Yeah. Because if I was going through this now at the same time as having a new baby, where you have all of the high risk factors for the mental health problems anyway, as we know, a professional lady who's had a baby a bit later, who wants everything just so, and all the lists, etc., are there, that throw this in as well with the mind and spirit things I've been talking about. Wow, yes, to me, you are really adding fuel to that fire. You really are. So it is about being aware. And also, if that new mum has got her own mum who's not well and isn't able to give the support that normally they would do, again, we need to find the support and encourage them for them somewhere else.
I think that illustrates, actually, Elaine, beautifully the kind of the complexity that we have to deal with in making sure that women are aware of symptoms, for example, of long COVID and postnatal depression. I hope, Edith, that's what you were seeking, because I think Elaine gave a very good response that was really useful. Thank you. And then Celine comes back now and says, what would be your one message for midwives going forward?
I would say it still is, look after yourself first so that you can look after others.
Yeah.
And Claire's nodding away.
Well, that's what I've always said, and that's just so right, because I've always said that in occupational medicine, and I think if we're in caring roles, you have to, and I taught it in life anyway. You're no good to anyone else unless you really are. It's keeping a balance, isn't it? I think it's keeping a balance, really. Yeah. And
that was a good question, Celine. So I think it's one of the difficulties, because of being in a health profession anyway, and as women, we're very often, there's a women-dominated profession. We're often balancing lots of different things and caring as well as working, and to look after ourselves is really important. And I'm going to repeat, being patient and kind and non-judgmental to self. I think that's a wonderful way to finish. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Claire and to Elaine. We could carry on for another hour easily, and I think there are some questions coming through, so Claire and Elaine might be able to answer some of these questions afterwards.
Yeah, of course. And I'm very happy to.
And I'd like to say a big thank you, and thank you to everyone who's dialed in, that's a very old-fashioned term, who's observed, come to watch the presentation. Thank you so much. Some of us will be on the social media answering some questions. Some of the questions, I have to say, which have come through, which are brilliant questions, of course, because of the nature of COVID and long COVID, we don't necessarily know all the answers to, but we'll try to answer some of them. There are resources available on the website and on Facebook, and this whole presentation will be available by Friday. Now, next week, completely change of scene, we're going to be looking at reverse mentorship with Dr. Jim Thornton and Rebecca Dewey. So come in at 7 o'clock next Wednesday for that. If you're doing forward planning, we have our festival on the 13th of January 2021. Can you believe it? That's online. We've got Professor Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent as a keynote, and there are some fantastic presentations. So do check out the website for that. And All Ireland Festival will be on the 9th of February also. And in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you to our speakers. Thank you to you. Keep well, look after yourselves as well as your loved ones. Give them all a hug. I'm sending you all a little virtual hug anyway, and a virtual hug to Claire and Elaine, who've been so generous with their information and their time. So thank you and good night.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.